Ethan Rourke had seen a lot in his life. He had faced collapsing stars, asteroid storms that could rip a ship apart, and alien species that thought humans were primitive. Yet nothing in his career had prepared him for the Zerathi Baron Veklar. The Baron was notorious across multiple systems for his cruelty, his wealth, and his absolute delight in humiliating others. When Ethan received the invitation, he didn't expect kindness. He expected a trap. Still, he accepted. Pride and curiosity pulled him through the stars to the Zerathi stronghold, a massive orbital palace that shimmered like a jewel against the void. The docking bay was enormous, lined with vehicles shaped like glistening sea creatures, thrumming with alien energy. Ethan's ship, a battered but reliable human freighter, looked almost laughably small beside them. He stepped out onto the platform, eyes scanning the crowd of Zerathi nobles and their human attendants. Every alien face carried that same smug certainty. Humans were amusing, limited, predictable. Ethan smiled faintly. They had no idea. He was led into the grand hall, a space of impossible scale, where lights floated like stars above an endless crowd of alien observers. Baron Veklar sat on a throne that looked carved from black crystal. His long limbs stretched arrogantly. He leaned forward, resting his chin on one clawed hand, his multiple eyes glinting with amusement. "Ah, Captain Rourke," he said, his voice layered and echoing unnaturally. "I wondered when the humans would finally dare to step into the galaxy's true stage." Ethan inclined his head politely. "Your invitation suggested a peaceful discussion, Baron." His tone was calm, but the sharpness of his gaze betrayed him. Every instinct he had screamed caution, yet he knew fear would only play into the Baron's hands. "Peaceful?" Veklar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "We shall see. Tonight is a celebration, a gift, and I have chosen you as the recipient of my generosity." At his signal, a hover platform glided forward. On it lay a human girl, pale and fragile, her body unmoving except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. Ethan immediately recognized the signs. She was paralyzed from the waist down. Her eyes were wide with fear and confusion, scanning the room as if looking for some friendly face. "This is Leora," Veklar announced to the assembled crowd, each word dripping with mockery. "She is yours. Consider her a gift." The Baron's laughter spread through the nobles like wildfire. Ethan felt the subtle currents of their scorn. They expected outrage. They expected human weakness to show, some sign of humiliation. But Ethan felt nothing like what they expected. He didn't see an insult. He saw a child. He saw fear and fragility, yes, but he also saw potential. He stepped forward, moving smoothly through the crowd of gasping onlookers. "Thank you for trusting me with her care," he said quietly, as though speaking to Leora alone. He knelt and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched at first, then met his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them. A spark of recognition, a hint of hope. The nobles tittered at his composure, expecting him to crumble. And even Veklar's multiple eyes narrowed in irritation. "She is fragile," he hissed, stepping down from his throne. "Do not mistake your curiosity for kindness." "She will never move, never be useful. She is a human joke, Captain, and now she is yours." Ethan straightened. "If you call her a joke, perhaps it is because you have not looked closely enough." He gestured toward the hovering pod that held her safely. "You see only weakness. I see someone who deserves care, respect, and the chance to grow." A silence fell over the hall. The Baron's face twisted in disbelief, then anger. Humans had a strange way of responding. They did not bow or tremble. They turned insult into calm. They met cruelty with poise. Ethan had done exactly that. He picked up the controls of the pod and activated the gentle hum of its life support systems. Slowly, Leora's pod descended to the floor, allowing her to sit upright. For the first time, the audience could see her features clearly: wide brown eyes, soft hair, an expression of cautious curiosity. "You see, she can breathe, she can think, and she can watch," Ethan said, almost conversationally. "And from those things, anything is possible," the nobles whispered among themselves, uncomfortable at the lack of the expected spectacle. Vekler's eyes flashed, narrowing as he studied Ethan. "Bold words for a human," he said. "Do you believe that your species can defy the laws of biology and logic simply by wishing it?" Ethan smiled faintly. "No. I believe that humans find solutions where others see only limits." He lifted Leora's pod into the air with ease, using the onboard controls to stabilize it. "And sometimes we prove it, when others least expect it." Vekler's gaze flicked to Leora, who was now cautiously stretching her fingers, moving them slightly, testing the space around her. She could not walk, but her mind was sharp, alert, and already forming impressions of this strange alien world. Ethan spoke softly, so only she could hear. "We will figure this out together. I promise you that." Leora's lips twitched in the beginnings of a smile, a small but defiant motion. The Baron, seeing his plan unraveling, leaned closer to Ethan. "Do you not fear the galaxy, human? Its dangers, its power, its cruelty?" Ethan glanced at the crowd, then back at the Baron. "I respect the galaxy, but fear? Fear is for those who have no plan. Humans have plans, and when the galaxy underestimates us, that is when we shine." Vekler's snarl of irritation revealed his discomfort. He had assumed that showing a helpless child would reduce Ethan to weakness, but instead, it exposed something the Baron did not understand. Humans valued life, courage, and ingenuity over fear. The evening continued with the usual pageantry, with Vekler parading the gift as if to humiliate Ethan. But the human remained calm. He spent the time observing, taking in the layout of the palace, the weaknesses in the guards' formations, and even the nuances of Scifi technology. Leora sat quietly at his side, watching with keen eyes, absorbing every detail, learning from Ethan's calm composure. By the time the banquet ended, Ethan had made his intentions clear without saying much. He would protect Leora, he would honor her, and he would find a way to turn even this mockery into advantage. He had come alone to the Baron's world, but he would leave with a new ally, someone the galaxy expected to be powerless, but who would soon show that humans could transform adversity into strength. As he departed, the nobles whispered among themselves, humans were not what they had thought. Ethan did not yet act openly against Vekler, but in his mind, plans were already forming. Every slight, every challenge, every insult was a tool to be used. And Leora, fragile as she seemed, was already learning. By the time the stars disappeared behind the orbital palace, one thing was clear. The Scifi had given a gift meant to humiliate a human. But instead, they had lit the spark of something far greater, something that would shock the galaxy when it finally revealed itself. Ethan didn't celebrate victory. There was too much work ahead. But he felt something rare. The quiet thrill of possibility. A child, paralyzed and underestimated, and a species mocked across the stars. Together, they could rewrite expectations, and in the vast darkness of space, where arrogance often outweighed wisdom, that spark of human determination would grow, quietly, steadily, until no alien could ignore it. By the time Ethan and Leora returned to his ship, the stars stretched before them, endless and bright. He placed her pod in the center of the cabin, and for the first time, she moved freely inside it, testing controls with a sense of wonder. "You'll be safe here," he said softly, more to himself than to her, "and soon we'll find a way to show the galaxy just what humans can do." For the first time, Leora felt hope. For the first time, she realized that weakness was only what others believed it to be. In the hands of a human, even a joke could become a challenge, and a challenge could become triumph. And so, the journey began. A journey not of revenge, but of discovery, ingenuity, and the quiet, unstoppable power of humans who refuse to be underestimated. The hum of Ethan's ship was a comfort, steady and familiar. As the stars stretched endlessly outside the observation window, Leora's pod floated quietly in the center of the cabin, its controls glowing softly. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe, not because she could move on her own, but because she trusted Ethan. Every small action he took was deliberate, measured, and calm. She had watched him at the Zarathi Gala, had seen how he turned humiliation into quiet power. Now she wanted to understand him, to learn from him, and perhaps, in her own way, to prove she could be more than what anyone expected. Ethan adjusted the controls of the pod, testing its internal systems. "These are basic stabilizers," he said, his voice calm and steady. "They'll help you move safely while I work on something more advanced." Leora's eyes followed his hands, marveling at the precision and speed with which he worked. He was human, yes, but he seemed almost impossible. Nothing about him suggested weakness. "You really think I can move again?" Leora asked quietly, her voice a mixture of hope and doubt. Ethan smiled. "I think everyone can move if given the right tools. Your body may not cooperate yet, but your mind is strong. That's what matters most." For the first time, Leora felt a glimmer of possibility. She touched the controls of the pod, experimenting slowly. Small movements, tiny adjustments. The pod responded. She lifted her arm, hesitated, then lowered it. A simple motion, but a victory nonetheless. Ethan watched her without comment, letting her discover her potential. Meanwhile, back in the Zarathi stronghold, Baron Veklar paced before a holographic display. His claws traced patterns in the air as his multiple eyes flicked with irritation. The human captain had left with the girl, and already rumors were reaching him. Whispers that Ethan had done more than protect Leora, that he was experimenting, learning, planning. The Baron's lips curled. "Fools," he hissed. "They think they can challenge me. They think a human can turn a child's weakness into power. I will see their arrogance destroyed." The Zarathi nobles, however, were divided. Some had always admired humans from a distance, their unpredictability, their stubbornness, but none dared speak in public. The Baron's wrath was legendary. Still, Ethan's calm defiance was unsettling. He had expected fear and received none. On the ship, Ethan had no such concerns. He spent the next hours integrating the alien tech subtly hidden in the pod into a compact biomechanical support system. The system would eventually allow Leora to move more freely, even partially bypassing her paralysis. He worked tirelessly, his hands steady, his mind calculating, making sure every mechanism was safe. The real challenge, he knew, was not the machine, but teaching Leora to trust it, to trust herself. As the pod systems came online, Leora tried lifting her legs. Nothing. She flinched, frustrated, but Ethan remained calm. "Patience," he said simply. "Every attempt builds strength. Every failure teaches you control." She tried again. This time, the pod's subtle exoskeleton responded, supporting her legs. She lifted them slightly. Ethan's eyes lit up with quiet approval. "Good. Very good. Now again." With each repetition, Leora's confidence grew. Soon, she was moving enough to shift herself within the pod. The human ship, once a vessel of transport, was now becoming a lab of potential, a place where weakness could transform into capability. Leora's transformation was not just physical. Her mind sharpened with every small victory. She observed Ethan constantly, absorbing his techniques, his calm reasoning, his ability to anticipate challenges. She began suggesting small modifications to the pod systems. Ethan listened, nodded, and implemented her ideas. In a short time, she was no longer just a passive recipient of his knowledge. She was a partner, a co-creator. Back in the Zerathi stronghold, Baron Veklar grew impatient. Reports of the human captain's actions had reached him. The girl was no longer fragile. The pod had been modified, and whispers suggested humans were already learning to integrate alien technology. The Baron's mind raced. He had expected humiliation, a simple proof of human inferiority. Instead, he was confronted with human adaptability and ingenuity. His pride bristled. "Prepare a team," he commanded.
"Observe them. Interfere if necessary."
"Make sure their arrogance does not grow too bold." Ethan anticipated this sooner than the Baron expected. He had spent hours scanning for signals, reading subtle fluctuations in the galactic network. He detected a small fleet shadowing his path, likely scouts sent by the Baron. He smiled faintly. "You really never learn," he muttered. Leora looked up from the pod controls. "Who?" "The aliens who think they can intimidate us," he said. "They've underestimated humans for too long. That's going to change." When the scouts arrived, they were met not with fear, but with a carefully laid trap. Ethan had modified the ship's systems to create decoy signals, to mislead sensors, and to subtly jam communications. The aliens approached expecting compliance, and instead found themselves navigating through false data and automated defenses designed to push them back gently but firmly. No one was harmed, yet their confidence began to falter. Inside the pod, Leora watched every action with awe. The humans' ability to turn alien technology and arrogance against them amazed her. She had never realized the extent of human ingenuity, nor the patience and calm that allowed them to act with precision even under pressure. Each move Ethan made was like a lesson, demonstrating not just skill but the human mindset. Careful, strategic, and unyielding. Days passed in this manner. Leora's abilities improved steadily, her confidence growing alongside her strength. She learned to manipulate the pod's exoskeleton with fine control, testing her balance, her reflexes, and her coordination. She experimented with small tools, assisted Ethan in minor repairs, and even helped plot courses that would evade potential threats. With each task, she felt a growing sense of agency. The Baron, watching from afar, grew more frustrated. Each report painted a picture of humans defying expectations. He sent envoys, then more scouts, then a small strike team, each time trying to test their limits, each time finding humans who anticipated, adapted, and overcame. The Zerathi could not understand it. How could a species so underestimated be so consistently unpredictable? Ethan and Leora had formed a rhythm. He taught, she learned. She suggested. He refined. Together they moved through the stars, always aware that the Baron was watching, always preparing for the next challenge. Leora's initial fear faded, replaced by determination. She began to see that her body was not her limitation. Her mind was her strength. The pod and its enhancements were extensions of her will, allowing her to move, act, and contribute in ways no one had expected. The day came when a new threat arrived. A small Zerathi patrol ship, armed and aggressive. Ethan calmly directed Leora to take control of the pod's defensive systems, guiding her hand as she activated shields and automated deterrents. The aliens approached confident of their superiority, and were met with precise, calculated resistance. They had not been destroyed, but they had been repelled, forced to retreat with a humiliating failure. Leora's eyes sparkled with excitement. "We did it," she said, barely able to contain her joy. Ethan smiled, though he remained calm. "We did. But remember, this is only the beginning. The galaxy underestimates humans at every turn. Every small victory counts." As they traveled further from the Zerathi stronghold, Leora began experimenting with independent movement. She pushed herself in the pod, learning the limits of her exoskeleton, testing new maneuvers, and finding solutions to problems Ethan had not anticipated. She realized that humans did not simply survive, they adapted, innovated, and thrived where others would falter. The Baron, meanwhile, seethed. His plan had been simple: humiliate a human, assert his superiority, and display the galaxy's hierarchy. Instead, he had watched the human turn weakness into strength, frustration into opportunity, and fear into determination. Every failed attempt to intimidate them was another blow to his pride, and he could not predict their next move. Ethan knew this. He knew the Baron expected fear and hesitation, yet humans operated differently, calm, strategic, and relentless. He watched Leora, proud of her progress but aware that the challenges ahead would be greater. The Baron's arrogance would not waver easily, and the galaxy was watching. But for now, they were together, safe and capable. Leora had discovered her own strength, and Ethan had found an ally more resilient than he had ever expected. The ship hummed quietly as it cut through the void, a small beacon of human determination and ingenuity. Every star they passed reminded them of the vastness of the universe and of the countless opportunities to surprise those who doubted them. By the time they reached a distant system to resupply, Leora was no longer the fragile girl who had been presented as a joke. She moved with precision, thought with clarity, and acted with confidence. The pod had become an extension of herself, a testament to what humans could achieve when underestimated. And Ethan, ever watchful, prepared for the next stage of their journey, the inevitable confrontation with the Baron himself. Together they had begun to rewrite expectations, not with violence, but with ingenuity, patience, and the quiet power of human determination. The galaxy would take notice, whether the Zarathi liked it or not. And Leora, once paralyzed, had become living proof that humans were far more than anyone dared to believe. The stars outside the ship's viewport stretched endlessly, bright and distant, indifferent to the small struggles of a human and a girl once deemed helpless. Ethan monitored the navigational readouts, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Leora sat upright in her pod, her fingers dancing across controls with the ease of someone who had long since learned to trust her own mind. The pod's exoskeleton had been upgraded again, subtly but significantly. Each day she moved closer to freedom, closer to reclaiming what had been stolen from her by circumstance and by cruel alien laughter. "Captain," Leora said softly, glancing at the array of screens. "I think they're close. Sensors are picking up multiple ships in the outer sector. They're not just scouts this time." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He already knew whose ships these were. The Baron had grown impatient. Veklar had no intention of letting a human girl, enhanced by ingenuity and determination, continue unchecked. He wanted a demonstration of his authority, a confrontation meant to humiliate, perhaps even to destroy. "They've learned to predict our movements," Ethan said. "Not perfectly, but enough to test us. Stay focused, Leora. Remember everything I've taught you. Every move, every control, every response, it counts now more than ever." The ships emerged from the void like black sharks against the starlight. Sleek, angular, and bristling with weaponry, they approached cautiously, underestimating what awaited them. Ethan adjusted the ship's trajectory, making slight alterations that forced the enemy into inefficient formations. "We won't fight them recklessly," he murmured. "We'll teach them a lesson first." Leora's eyes gleamed with excitement. "You mean, we're going to outsmart them?" "Yes," Ethan said simply. "Exactly that." The alien strike team descended, expecting resistance but not strategy. As they closed in, Ethan triggered a series of automated decoys, holographic images of the ship appearing in multiple locations. Each decoy emitted false signatures, confusing the enemy sensors. The Zarathi ships fired blindly at shadows, wasting energy and ammunition, while Ethan and Leora's real vessel slipped through the confusion with graceful precision. Leora grinned, her heart racing. "They can't even hit us!" "They expected fear," Ethan said.
And humans
don't work that way. His voice was calm, almost soothing, but every word carried authority. Leora felt a surge of pride. The humans, they weren't just strong, they were clever, fearless, and relentless. When the ships realized the deception, the Baron himself appeared on the holofeed projected from the enemy flagship. His eyes glimmered with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Captain Rourke," he hissed, each word layered with venom. "You presume to evade me? You presume to resist the will of the Zerathi?" Ethan looked at the projection calmly. "I only presume to survive and to protect what is important," he said. "You may have expected fear, but that was your first mistake." The Baron's multiple eyes flickered with irritation. "You flaunt human arrogance, yet you cannot match Zerathi power." "Power isn't measured in intimidation or weapons," Ethan said. "It's measured in creativity, in strategy, and in courage. Something you clearly lack when you underestimate others." Veklar's fury was barely contained. He barked orders to his fleet, but Ethan had anticipated this. Leora activated the pod's extended sensors, scanning enemy formations and relaying precise movement adjustments to Ethan. Using her knowledge and intuition, she guided the ship in ways that no alien could predict. Together, human and girl moved like a single entity, a seamless combination of mind and technology. The enemy ships fired again, but Ethan had rigged the vessel to emit a subtle gravitational field that diverted incoming projectiles. Missiles spiraled off course, energy beams met with resistance, and alien formations began to falter. The Baron's voice rose in frustration. "Impossible!" "They should not. How can humans be this adaptive?" "Because we refuse to be predictable," Ethan said, his calmness unshaken. "We adapt, we learn, and we overcome." Leora's heart pounded with exhilaration. Each command she gave, each adjustment she made, was a proof of her own strength. She had been presented as a joke, a paralyzed child meant to humiliate a human. Instead, she was the catalyst for a human demonstration of ingenuity and determination. The irony was not lost on her. The Zerathi fleet began to retreat, their formations disrupted, their confidence shaken. And then, without warning, Ethan engaged a secondary system, a series of controlled energy pulses that interfered with the enemy ship's navigation systems. They were not destroyed, but they were incapacitated, forced to drift helplessly in space, unable to maneuver effectively. The Baron's face on the holofeed contorted with rage. "You cannot defeat me!" Veklar roared. "You cannot! Humans are weak." Ethan smiled faintly. "Weak? Perhaps you need to redefine your expectations." It was then that Leora did something entirely unexpected. She disengaged her pod's restraints, allowing herself to stand within the exoskeleton. Her movements were careful but deliberate. She walked, then ran, then leaped across the interior of the ship, the exoskeleton responding flawlessly to her will. Ethan watched with pride, but also a hint of awe. The girl he had been given as a joke was now standing before him as a symbol of human potential realized. The Baron's voice faltered, replaced by silence. His eyes widened as he realized the true extent of what humans could achieve. A paralyzed girl, once deemed helpless, was now moving with agility, control, and precision that rivaled trained soldiers. And she had done it not because of brute force, but because of ingenuity, guidance, and determination, the very qualities the Zerathi had dismissed as insignificant. Ethan stepped beside her, calm and unwavering. "Do you see now?" he asked. "We are not what you think. You tried to humiliate us. You tried to assert superiority. But you underestimated what humans can do when given a chance. And when we refuse to be cowed." Leora raised her hand, extending a gesture of challenge, of confidence. "We are more than you imagined," she said, her voice steady. "And we will not be limited by your expectations." The Baron's face contorted in anger, then frustration, Then finally something like fear. He realized that this human, this girl, had not only survived his cruelty, but had transformed it into power. He had expected fear, weakness, and compliance, and instead found defiance, skill, and unity. Ethan and Leora moved as one, their coordination seamless. They demonstrated not violence, but precision, intelligence, and strategy. The Baron's fleet, forced to retreat and reevaluate, became a cautionary tale. Across the stars, the message was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even those who seemed weakest could become their greatest challenge. As the enemy ships withdrew, Leora turned to Ethan, her eyes shining. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." "Yes," Ethan said, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "But remember, this was only the first test. Veklar will not accept defeat easily. The galaxy is watching. And humans will rise to every challenge, every time." The victory was quiet, understated, yet profound. They had not destroyed the Baron's fleet. They had shown that humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast even the most arrogant and powerful alien forces, and in doing so, they had begun to reshape the perception of humanity across the galaxy. Later, as the ship drifted through the stars, Leora reflected on her journey. She had once been paralyzed, a child presented as a joke to humiliate a human. Now she moved with confidence, thought with clarity, and acted with determination. She had discovered her own strength, learned from the human who had guided her, and realized that weakness was often only what others expected to see. Ethan, ever watchful, adjusted the ship's course toward a distant system where they could repair, resupply, and prepare for the next stage of their journey. He had faced countless dangers, yet this felt different. This was not a simple encounter with hostile forces. It was a demonstration of what humans could achieve when underestimated, a proof that determination, intelligence, and courage could transform the impossible into reality. The Baron, meanwhile, seethed. Reports from his fleet painted a picture of humans who could anticipate, adapt, and overcome in ways he could not predict. His arrogance had blinded him. And now he faced the undeniable truth. Humans were not weak, they were not predictable, and they were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Leora, seated in her pod once more, watched the stars with a sense of wonder. She understood now that strength was not only physical, but mental, strategic, and emotional. She had learned from Ethan, yes, but she had also discovered her own potential. Together, they were a force that the galaxy would have to reckon with. Humans who refused to be underestimated. And as the ship continued through the void, moving farther from the Zerathi stronghold and closer to the unknown challenges ahead, Ethan and Leora prepared for what was to come. The Baron would not give up easily. The galaxy would not wait, and humans, misunderstood, underestimated and underestimated again, were only beginning to show their true power. In that quiet moment, drifting among the stars, Leora smiled. She was no longer a joke. She was not a symbol of weakness. She was proof. Proof that humans, even when tested, mocked, or underestimated, could rise, adapt, and astonish the universe. And together with Ethan, she would continue to do just that, until the galaxy learned to respect the unstoppable, unpredictable strength of humanity.